For games that originally appeared on Sony handhelds, it feels like the biggest measure of success is in whether they eventually get ported onto Sony's home consoles. Cause even though platforms like the PSP and the Vita never reached the success of their Nintendo competitors, there's some great games that originated on these platforms. On that note, we've got Velocity 2X, which saw a PS4 re-release in 2018. Before clocking a single minute in the game itself, I dug the art style and the aesthetics. It's sleek, fluidly animated, colorful, and vibrant. In this deluxe package, you've got the game itself, the great retro-futuristic soundtrack, and a behind-the-scenes documentary, as well as a studio booklet. Anyone else find it kinda funny how an indie production like this has no problem providing a great all-around package like this at a budget price, but it's too much to ask for most major AAA games this generation to throw in as much as a decent manual? In other words, I was priming myself to love this game before even installing it. Maybe that's not the most objective frame of mind to be in, but I was not disappointed. Velocity 2X does things its own way. You'll probably need some time to get used to the interface. There are two main modes of play, a top-down space shooter in the vein of Galaga or Gradius, and on-foot side-scroller segments. Now both of these playstyles are almost as old as gaming itself, and they've developed a number of tropes for our muscle memory to lean on when we play sections like this. But I promise you, if you play this game like a mashup of Gradius and Contra, you're gonna have a bad time. Those are great games, but comparing Velocity 2X to them seems almost crass in a way, because this game's mechanics do mix things up in a way that feels genuinely original. Cause good design is in large part about making the player feel at one with the game. I'm not asking you to achieve enlightenment or anything, but it's about making it so that you're not consciously thinking about the controller or the interface while you play. The experience should feel seamless. Just as an aside, that's my big bugbear with motion controls, because a lot of the time, instead of feeling seamless, they draw your attention to the control interface, and in some cases that can straight up destroy a game. But anyway, Velocity 2X has its work cut out for it because it needs to introduce so many new concepts in a short amount of time without overloading the player. The first batch of levels don't even deal with the side-scroller stuff, instead putting you in the cockpit. They want you to be reasonably comfortable with the ship before you have to start memorizing two different play interfaces. And that first level is a whopper. They throw you right into the fire with a full-blown speedrun level where the only mechanics you really need to know are basic movement, your gun, and your boost. Oh yeah, and you gotta go fast. This footage was actually my very first time playing not just this level, but this game. The most recent ship shooter I had played before this was Mora X last fall, so I thought I'd be a bit out of practice, but I aced the level. I'm not saying this to bulk up my own ego, I'm saying this because that's a testament to how fluidly this first level is designed. It throws you right in with the three basic ship mechanics, movement, laser, and boost, and it gives you a level that keeps you alert but doesn't strain you too hard. Level after level, this game spends ample time with you introducing new concepts and new applications without feeling like a sloggy tutorial. Instead, the early levels will introduce a new mechanic, and then let you spend time with it and internalize it instead of just flinging you into the wind. One big key mechanic is teleporting. You push square to bring up the teleport reticule, then move the crosshairs to where you want to teleport. It's a pretty safe technique to practice and get good at in the side-scroller parts, but in the ship, when you're constantly moving, you need to be quick and sure with your teleports. It can take some getting used to, but before too long it had nestled in my muscle memory right next to the boost. But those early levels give you the breathing room that you need to be able to make the technique a part of your muscle memory. They don't even introduce enemies into the equation until several levels in. This game wants you to feel comfortable with it. To contrast, let's talk real quick about a Hall of Shame example of introducing a technique in a way that constitutes unintuitive bad design. In Metroid Other M, yeah, I know a few of you just groaned at the mention of it, but stay with me. The rote didactic tutorial at the beginning shows you how to use power bombs. This technique is then discarded and doesn't come into play again until the final boss, during which there is a point where you need to know to use power bombs, as well as remember how to do them within seconds or you die. And that's a shame, because so many other Metroid games are paragons of great design, but Velocity 2X on the other hand doesn't make the mistake of assuming the player can read the developer's mind. This game is a masterclass on how to introduce tricky concepts and mingle them together without making everything seem overly complicated or making you feel lost. In the ship sections, your lasers are fired by pressing the X button, but on foot, you shoot in any direction by pushing the right control stick in that direction. I kinda dreaded this, because that sounded so unintuitive, but it became second nature. The levels are built to accommodate it and to let you learn. I find that when you really get down to it, the side-scrolling parts especially have a real rhythm to them, so switching up between the teleports and the stick shooting and the jumping and the sliding feels really intuitive and slick. The whole game has full functionality with both the D-pad and the control stick, but I find myself using the D-pad for the side-scroller sections and the stick for the flying sections. When you gain bombs, that's really the moment when you feel like all the new techniques that are piling on you are actually making you more powerful. You fire bombs from your ship with the right stick, turning you into a 4-directional destruction machine. It's pretty satisfying, and surprisingly intuitive. The first new mechanic that I didn't really take to was the throwable telepod. To reach certain areas on foot, or to get past certain obstacles, you have to carefully aim a teleport pod and throw it at the right angle to bounce it where you want it to be, then quickly hit triangle twice to teleport. I didn't love this, but I got used to it. If you're a split second off with the teleport, you'll just drop a pod instead. And the control on aiming the pod seems extremely sensitive and finicky. And besides, the whole idea of standing still and carefully aiming a pod kinda goes against the game's fast-paced velocity. But hey, considering the massive number of new mechanics this game throws at you, that this was the first one to really make me take pause is a testament to how the other tactics complement each other. This is an addictive game for all the right reasons. The levels aren't too long, so just one more level syndrome is in full swing here. But I should mention an interesting phenomenon that happened to me while I was recording. As time went on, having so many new techniques and tactics layered on top of each other, level after level, started to have this weird effect on me, where I'd hit boost when I intended to shoot, or I'd start using bombs and forget I had a regular laser, or I'd just completely forget about the teleport, and muscle memory would cause me to just not do what I wanted to. That said, I think the developers understood this because the checkpoint system is extremely generous. Dying doesn't carry too much of a penalty in the levels themselves. It's about overcoming the challenges in front of you, not having to slog back through stuff you've already beaten. Well, there is a caveat to that, but I'll get to that. Bear with me for a minute here, because I promise this is relevant, but when I was in high school, I had this math class that tried to have us absorb a whole new mathematical concept every single day. The brain just couldn't keep up with everything, because each concept would be tossed aside until the test to make room for new concepts. The teacher tried her best, but it was a horrible class that didn't understand or respect how the brain processes and retains information. Now, Velocity does understand how the brain retains concepts, and the crucial difference is that the previous techniques are constantly reinforced while new stuff is added, so it usually feels incredibly organic. Before I started playing, I thought I'd be structuring this review around the synthesis between the side-scroller and space shooter sections. But the way in which this game gets you to learn and retain concepts on the fly is absolutely the most crucial part of the experience, and it's the big thing to take away from Velocity if you happen to be a game designer yourself. That said, you might want to take a break now and then to let things simmer. So what happens when that just one more level syndrome takes hold, you play too long and don't take a break? Well, this footage here shows me fumbling around because I literally forgot how to shoot the gun, one of the most basic elements of the controls. The switch is right there and I just stare at it like a caveman staring at a microchip. You know how Pokemon can only learn 4 moves and they need to push out something to learn a new move? Yeah, well, 1, 2, 3, poof, Corey forgot how to freaking shoot. I played too long and this game broke my brain. It's a great game, but you need to take breaks. As the game progresses, you'll run into puzzles that test your ability to mix and match your techniques. Again, these are pretty awesome when you really get into the ebb and flow of it, because when this game hits its stride, everything feels like it has a rhythm to it. Although, remember I mentioned the finicky controls on the telepod throwing? Yeah, it seems like a small complaint in the early game until you get to the parts where you need to mix it up with precision maneuvers with very short windows for success. Okay, there is one level that I genuinely didn't like, and it's this one, entitled Labyrinth. First, you come to a bunch of paths, all blocked by energy fields controlled by switches that you need to drop other switches to clear out, but those are also behind other energy fields. So you go around for a while until you realize that none of the obvious paths are correct, and you need to make this insanely tight teleport to this open space you can just barely see at the absolute edge of the screen before you hit the wall. Those are the first switches you need to hit before the level starts opening up. That sets the tone perfectly, because the level is kind of like the water temple from Ocarina of Time, in how you constantly have to go back and forth hitting switches. You'll constantly be breaking the flow to check the map just to remember where the next switch is. Okay, it's not water temple bad, because you can snap back with teleport pods, but this level does not see Velocity playing to its strengths. You'll occasionally run into this General Glaive, who acts as a recurring boss each time with a different setup. Like here in this second battle, you need to teleport between the lasers to fire at these shield generators in the proper sequence before you can start laying into them. I really enjoyed these boss battles because the mechanics build on the battles that came before and even start to incorporate on-foot elements to go along with the space combat. And that's right, boys and girls, the boss battles bring us Bullet Hell. That said, it's a much softer and gentler version of Bullet Hell. Call it Bullet Heck. You'll be dodging lasers coming at you on multiple axes, but one hit won't kill you. Actually, Velocity 2X is not an especially hard game in terms of the play experience. I talked about the generous checkpoints, but you also have a health bar that can take quite a pounding before you die. Health pickups are also scattered throughout the levels. Playing this game probably won't make you very salty, so if you're looking for more of a low-sodium ride, I think you'll like it a lot. That's not to say it's a super easy game, but the lenient checkpoints make it so that you get ample opportunity to try again when you screw up. Of course, the later levels ask more of you than the early spots, but the game's difficulty curve does such a good job of easing you in and teaching you one technique at a time, and reinforcing those techniques, that you don't end up feeling totally swamped. For example, later on you'll be introduced to switches that close after a short time instead of just staying open after you shoot them, and the time you're given is usually very strict. But even then, the generous checkpoints keep things from falling on the wrong side of frustrating, even if you have to retake the same puzzle a bunch of times. And in terms of a death penalty, this game just might be the anti-Dark Souls. When you die, all the enemies and the turrets you kill before dying will stay dead, and if you die on a boss encounter, the damage you did before you died will still carry over. As for whether this is a good thing or a negative, that's gonna be very subjective. I'm a huge fan of Dark Souls and Bloodborne and the way they present their challenge, but at the same time, I'm okay with this. There is a caveat to all this talk about difficulty, though. Yes, it seems lenient on the surface, but there's a level of punishment that's hidden at first, and I'm not sure if it's the right kind of punishment. I really dig this game on the whole, and I want you to buy it, so when I come down on it like this, I'm doing it out of love. And just a warning now, I'm gonna be going pretty deep into this caveat. And that caveat is this: you can be locked out of the later levels if you don't gain enough XP from the earlier levels. At the end of every level, you're graded on speed, captives rescued, and crystals collected, the usual suspects. At first I didn't know what the XP was for, because I wasn't really using it for anything. Every upgrade just came as the game introduced new technology and new tactics. But all that experience is going into one big pot, and if that pot isn't big enough, you can be locked out from finishing the game until you go back and do it better. So it turns out those lenient checkpoints really weren't so lenient after all, because if you take a lot of time retrying a really precise maneuver, that's time ticking away from your overall score. Now here's why I don't like this. First and least importantly, I feel like it dilutes the concept of experience points. If you're gonna call it XP, that's something that we associate with getting stronger or being able to spend it to upgrade your weapons or make your health bar bigger. But being able to upgrade your weapons or health is something that makes you feel more powerful, but is not necessary for completion. This is necessary for completion, meanwhile. If it's just a points tally, well, honestly, most people haven't really cared about high scores as an element of games since around the time I was born, so you just might not be thinking about it as you play. I'd actually call experience points the proper evolution of the old school points counter, because XP actually does something to deepen and enrich your in-game progression, but that's a topic for another day. Anyway, the reason I don't like that is because what's the only real solution to coming up short? You gotta go back through those old levels trying to do them faster and more thoroughly. And if you already got all the crystals and captives, then you just have to do it faster. And the reason I don't like that is because that shouldn't be the condition for simply being allowed to progress. If the player beats the level fair and square, that should be enough to simply progress. I don't think I'm being too entitled here, and I'll explain my stance. Imagine you beat a boss in Bloodborne, just as an example, but then the game refuses to let you go to the next area. Instead, the game tells you, oh no, you beat the boss while you had low health, so you didn't play well enough. Go and beat the boss again, and this time get hit less, then you can continue the game. It feels like busy work when the game is making you redo levels that you've already beaten, scrambling to do them faster or more thoroughly just so you can get on with the rest of the game. And when you're going back to improve your scores, you'll be scrambling and stressing because you know you need to outperform your last attempt. It's the same reason why you might hate a book when school is making you do an essay on it, but you'd have loved the same book if you had discovered it on your own and read it because you wanted to. And because your ability to progress in the game is on the line, it doesn't feel like you're trying to outdo your personal best like a Twitch speedrunner trying to crack that elusive PB. Instead, it feels like you're back in the drive test, being graded by an instructor who hasn't cracked a smile since the Nixon administration. To be fair, it's probably not quite as bad as I'm making it sound, because as far as I can tell, it doesn't actually take away XP if you underperform in a level you already beat. So if you already nailed the time, you can take your time coming back and gathering the crystals and the rescues that you missed. But that means that at the very, very least, this is busy work. And that just doesn't feel right to me. It's the kind of thing that would be better used as a gateway to unlocking bonus levels or the best ending. Now, games do that all the time, and that's an established trope because it works so well. You have to do the bonus areas and just generally be excellent in order to unlock the secret levels in the Donkey Kong Country games, but to beat the vanilla games, you just have to show that you can beat each level. Because when it's implemented to gate the player's progress through the main game, it totally breaks the flow. You can do very well in the majority of levels and still find yourself in a loop where you get locked out of the next level, you go back and grind XP in levels where you missed stuff or didn't go fast enough, unlock a level, and then fall short of enough to unlock the next level after that. I was something like 4/5 of the way through the game when this hit, but it turned the adrenaline rush into a dreary slog. Now, just because my script for this video spent over a page talking about this one nagging issue doesn't mean that I think it breaks the game or anything. It just means that I want to be thorough and constructive when I criticize. That, and it bears mentioning in depth because the developers chose to tie it in with your basic ability to beat the game. That said, if my reviews graded things on a numeric score instead of just letting the content of the review do the talking, I'd probably have no choice but to dock Velocity 2X a couple points for this. It's just heartbreaking to see this game do so much, not just right, but exemplary, and then snatch defeat from the jaws of victory like this. Although, that's a good reason why I don't use numbered scores, because when a game does some things beautifully and drops the ball in other aspects, I don't know that it'd be especially helpful for me to try and compress these nuances into a single number. Moving on, I won't say too much about the plot because it's best experienced through the little dialogue scenes you get before each level, but it keeps things moving. It's a nice, punchy little sci-fi plot about teaming up with a slave race to smash the Imperial oppressors. Nothing too mind-bending, but it fits the animated aesthetic and I like it. You gather codex entries throughout the game that expand the lore and world building, a little like the codex in Mass Effect. It's just a little detail that reflects how the developers cared about the world they were building, and I always appreciate that. Velocity 2X isn't a huge game, but this Critical Mass edition gives you a lot of value for the price. And like I've said before, that is absolutely something to applaud in today's gaming marketplace. Buying this game also lands you the DLC packed onto the disc, which can be accessed at any time. And before you ask, no, the XP from the DLC is not transferable to the main game when things start grinding to a halt. But if you're a fan of sci-fi games or space shooters or just want to see a game integrate, stack, and reinforce its concepts in really intuitive and clever ways, I recommend you check it out. I didn't cover all the mechanics that the game presents us with, nor all the cool stuff on display, and that's because I want you to be able to check it out and experience it for yourself. Aside from a few flaws that dampen the experience later on but don't destroy the experience, I'm very happy for the time I spent with Velocity 2X, and I hope you will be too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you want more, check out my website for plenty of text articles on games, film, and more, link in the description below. And if you want something a bit more fictional, it also has links to my novels in physical and digital formats. I'll see you next time.